Thank you. I haven't done this month yet. I'm like, I'm tired.
Hi, Ashton. Hi, folks. If I can have all of your attention, we are going to get started. For those on Zoom, we have about, oh yeah, that you can move that. Sorry, you can sit there. Yeah. That's just my bag. Yeah. For those on Zoom, I'm just going to share that we're about, hi folks. We're going to, for those on Zoom, I'm going to share that we're about 13, 14, I think a 14th person is coming in. So we have a nice little group today. It's very exciting. And thank you for those who are joining on Zoom. I'm going to begin with our land acknowledgement. Women Who Submit acknowledges the Tonga, Gabrielino, Kish, and Chumash people, past, present, and future, for their stewards of the Los Angeles County region of California, where Women Who Submit was founded, and whose sacred lands were stolen for the benefit of white supremacy on these unceded lands. We recognize land acknowledgements are meaningless if they do not include current struggles for land and autonomy by Native people and are void of action. Colonization continues to impact all of our communities, countries, and geopolitical systems. As of the fall of 2024, we recognize the particular struggles in Palestine, Sudan, and the Congo. Women Who Submit was founded on the principle of advocating for the most vulnerable to secure basic human rights for all and will continue to do so. In 2025 and beyond, Women Who Submit commits to making contributions to the Tongva Taxarat Paxava Conservancy, which works to receive land back, creative community, and housing for Native people, practice traditional ceremonies, establish a Native archive, and rematriate the land. If you'd like to join us in this effort, we encourage you to engage with the Tongva Taxarat Conservancy. For those on Zoom, Liz is putting links. Anything to be higher volume? Oh, I don't know. I have to think about that. Liz is putting links into the chat. For those of you not on Zoom, I will be sending an email afterward where you can get links. They were also affected by the Eaton fire, so there's also a wildfire fund for them. Reminders, whoops, this event is being recorded and can be found later on our YouTube chat. On our YouTube, Liz will be putting a link to our YouTube where you can find it. For those online, please check that you are muted and keep yourself muted throughout the program. A live transcript can be opened in Zoom. If you do not see a live transcript, you can find it in the menu in the right corner. This panel will end at 11:15 and the Zoom room will close after a break, in-person breakout sessions for new member orientation with Thea Puchel. Hi, Thea. And member submission party with Lauren Ager-Crow, who is not here yet, but she will be. I see Tony now. We'll go on and we'll begin at 11:45. So we'll have a break, sometimes for snacks. There's snacks up here. There's water here. This is for you all, and you're welcome to have it. Please, have water, have snacks whenever. You don't have to wait for the break. Okay. There's also a bathroom back here in this corner. That's where our bathroom is. Hi, Tony. This chair is maybe available. Welcome to the WWS Literary Workshop and New Member Orientation. We begin with applying to residencies with confidence and enthusiasm with Eva Recinos. Eva is an arts and culture journalist and creative nonfiction writer based in Los Angeles. Her reviews, features, and profiles have been featured in the Los Angeles Times, KCET, The Guardian, Hyperallergic, Art21, Aperture, Poets and Writers Magazine, The Creative Independent, and more. Her essays have appeared in Gulf Coast, Hank, Blood Orange Review, Airlight, The Electric Literature, and more. She has attended Tin House and Kenyon Review, Writers Workshop, and completed a residency with the Kimball Hardy Nelson Center for the Arts in 2024. And here is Eva.
Hello. Hi, everybody. How are we feeling? I know it's a little warm, so make sure that you stay hydrated. I hope you don't mind having a little fan up here. This is sort of a little mood chart that I like to share at the beginning of each workshop or class that I've been doing recently. So I thought I'd share it all with y'all so we could see how we feel on a scale of 1 through 6 cats. What's kind of the vibe? How do we feel? How many people are like number one right now? Show of hands. Okay. What about two? Okay. Three. I feel like three because I'm happy to be with you all. Thank you, Carla. What about four? Yeah. Okay, four. Just screaming. Just screaming. What about five? Okay, sleepy time. We're going to sleep. And what about six? Okay, it's kind of hot today, so maybe not a blanket around us. I think these are also can be stages of when you are applying to things, right? Especially one and two, where you're just like, how much do I have to do? What do I have to do? And then three, hopefully, is how you feel after you have submitted. Hopefully, you're happy and proud of the work that you've done. And yeah, I feel like 4 through 6 is generally just at any point in the application process. So just wanted to bring that up. We can go to the next slide, please.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to say which one I am. Okay.
Oh, which one are you? Which one are you? Okay, okay. So we are talking about applying for residencies today, and I really wanted to come at it from the angle of let's apply with confidence, with enthusiasm. So I'm hoping to give you some tips today, and please at any point interrupt if you have questions. We'll have time for questions at the end as well. Next slide, please. So we're going to talk about, first of all, how you might go about determining if a residency is right for you, and then how we can start to think about preparing a really strong application, and also just how to feel excited about applying when you are getting to that stage, because it is a really big deal. And I know we're all always juggling a bunch of projects and ideas and goals. So kudos to you for putting in the work and for showing up today too. That is a big thing. Next slide, please. You already got my bio from Sochi. This is my sort of fancy desk photo, but this is what I actually look like most days. I'm balancing writing with a cat who starts yelling for her dinner like an hour before she's supposed to get fed. So I know we all always have a lot of other things going on just in regular life on top of the writing. So again, kudos to you all for showing up here today. Next slide, please. I'm curious, how many of you have done a residency before? Okay, next question is,
Oh, sorry.
no, you're good. How many of you have applied for a residency? Oh, okay, good amount. And then I think next question is, how many of you hope to apply soon? Okay, great. So I first want to talk about just how to determine if a residency is right for you. So there's a few elements that I think you want to keep in mind in terms of the residency as an idea, but also specifics when you are applying. One thing I wanted to talk about was just space and place. So this idea of when you're doing a residency, you are of course going to be in a very specific place and a very specific space. And as Sochi mentioned in my bio, I recently did a residency at the Kimmel Harding Nelson Center for the Arts, which is actually interdisciplinary. So I had a roommate who was a visual artist, really incredible and talented. And then there were 3 other folks, one composer and one other visual artist and one other writer. So it was 5 of us in this house in Nebraska City, which I'd never been to in my life. This is all corn, just fields and fields of corn. And it was the type of trip where I actually had to get a ride with someone that was about 40 minutes to an hour to get to the house. So that was an adventure in and of itself. And then when we arrived, you know, my roommate and I shared this photo on the left. We shared a kitchen. We each had our own bathroom. I had my little office. She had her separate studio. So these are all things that you want to take into consideration. Just thinking about, do you thrive in an environment that's really new to you? This is something that I don't usually see in LA very much. I'm not somebody who is out and about in cornfields very often. So that was very new for me. Do you sort of feel like you're writing in a new location? If you are writing in a new location, does it help you feel more productive? Does it help you feel more nurtured and more creative? And also you want to think about, do you thrive on socializing with others or with presenting your work? So not all residencies require this, but for those of us who have applied a lot, we might know some residencies say at the end of your stay, we want you to present to the community. So maybe you're doing a program that's free and you're presenting, or maybe you're just reading a portion of what you're working on. So think about when you are researching residencies, do you want that to be a component? Will that help motivate you? Will it be more stressful? Do you want something where you're with a group, or do you want something where you're on your own? This particular residency, we all really got together once in a while when we felt like we had time. Some residencies will say, you know, maybe every Sunday you all have dinner that's built into the schedule. So these are all just some things to keep in mind. And I think if you do want a new environment, think about what is most conducive to you. Maybe there's certain elements that you don't have at home that you would like. For this residency, for example, I live in a 1-bedroom with my fiance. I do not have my own office. So this was such a treat for me to be able to have sort of my own separate room where I could just get up every day and work on the manuscript and then leave it there and be able to just kind of go to bed at the end of the day. So think about that as well. And also something that might feel, you know, small or kind of obvious, but speaking of today being a heat wave, you know, think about what sort of temperature is going to be most productive to you. What time of the year is your favorite? Think about these things when you are sort of researching and looking at the dates for residencies, because it is really exciting to think about doing a residency, being in a different place. But I think these realities kind of come into play once you arrive. We go to the next, yeah. So that's actually that was my little office space. It's such a beautiful window. Again, like more space than I usually have at home, which is really lovely. This is sort of a little setup they did at the front, which was all the current residents. So we were there for a span of anywhere from 2 weeks to, I believe, almost 2 months, which I'll talk about a little bit later as well. I also want you to think about sort of what does your manuscript or your project need at this moment? And we'll get into that a little bit later when we look at the elements of applications. But do you have a specific project that you've been meaning to dedicate more time to? Are you in the middle of a really sort of crucial project or a crucial moment and you just want to be able to focus on that? Think about, is it in the right stage for this residency, or is there another project that you want to consider instead, or another time that you might want to be applying? So you also want to have a sense of what is it that you still need to complete. So I will actually give you an example of one of my answers to this application, but I had a very clear sense of this is where I am, this is where I want to be, and this is how I'm going to be spending the time during the residency as well. And that can also include research, right? It doesn't always have to be creating things, producing new writing. It can also be, I need time to be able to just read and research and go through articles and go through books that I've been meaning to get to that you haven't had the time to focus on. So really your time can be for whatever it is that you need for that project. And as you're asking yourself these questions, as we're thinking about space and place and your project and your goals, these are all going to help you when you are working on your application materials as well. And then also, I would encourage you to think about the timing. So like I mentioned, this residency, we were all there about 2 weeks to maybe, I think, a month and a half or 2 months. So residencies can really be from a few weeks to multiple months. Make sure that you are sort of checking on that length as you are researching and applying for residencies, and that you're also getting clarity on what the dates are. So a lot of the times they will kind of outline that in the application. They'll ask you what your date preferences are. They'll ask you if you're flexible to change, because they're trying to sort of accommodate a lot of different people who are applying. But I would encourage you to think about that before you even start the application, because you don't want to sort of start an application and then realize you can't make those dates, or those dates aren't something that you're quite comfortable with. And again, think about, is there a time of year that you would prefer? Like I said, we all have all of these different things in life that are outside of the writing life as well. So is there a time of the year that feels like you can actually focus when you go ahead and do this residency? I think too, find a time that, you know, wouldn't cause more stress in your usual routine. You want to be able to work on things when you're there and not feel like you're stressed out about things you need to do or feeling anxious about things that are happening at that moment. I know it's not always easy to predict, but just sort of thinking about time of year, I think is important. And also just think about how long can you comfortably be away from home. I think it can feel really romantic to think about being away from home for a long time for some of us, but again, the realities of it might be a little different. It might be something that you don't quite know until you get there. For the Kimmel Harding Nelson residency I did, I stayed there for 2 weeks, which was the longest that I'd done. But I actually found that it took me a little bit to sort of settle into being in Nebraska, to settle into being in a new house. So these are things that I think will come up, but that you might want to think about before you apply. Next slide. So I want to talk about the theme of today. I want us to look like this. Yay, we're all so excited. So I want you to apply with enthusiasm and with confidence. I think a lot of the times, at least, especially when I was first starting out as a writer, I get really excited about all the opportunities that are out there and how it's prestigious and how it would be really cool to do. But I also want you to keep in mind, like, what's actually helpful to you. It's, of course, there's a lot of shiny opportunities out there, but when you get into the logistics and into your project and your needs, like, think about what you are really excited to apply for. So I think part of that means that we want to know exactly what the specifics are of each residency. And I feel like when you apply with that enthusiasm, which I'll talk about a little bit later, the panel or whoever the reviewers can really feel that and can really get a sense of that as well. Next slide, please. This is what we talked about a little bit. Next slide. So I did an interview with an author named Emmy Neatfield a while ago, and she actually was on a panel for a residency that she had completed. And so I wanted to kind of pick her brain about some of the behind the scenes logistics of it all. And one thing that she mentioned is that every organization that is doing a residency and has these opportunities, they really want to maximize their impact on the writers and the artists that they're choosing. So Emmy basically outlined that part of that is they want to select people that they feel like they can help the most. And I think part of that is also just you saying, this is why I want this specific residency. It's not just a random choice that I'm making. I've thought it out. And the organization will kind of really hear that and it'll resonate with them. So I think you can really try to strengthen your application in that way. Be specific about the stage that you're in with your project too, and what you hope you can achieve. Because if you're saying, oh, I'm in the middle of something and I'm so close to finishing it, or I really just need the time, I really need the space, they can feel like they're really maximizing their impact on your work. And another thing that she mentioned is if they feel like maybe you're just applying to apply or it's kind of random, you're probably going to be less engaged in the future. And so they reached out to her again to sort of be on the board and review applications because they felt like she was really engaged, she was interested in community. And so they really want you to come back sort of as an alum, right? And give back and connect and talk about how the residency really helped you with your work. So a lot of the times you might see in the acknowledgements of books that authors will give shout outs to their residencies. And that sort of gives you a sense of, how important and significant it was to them as well. Please. Another thing that Emmy brings up is to really apply with the material that you're most confident about, which I feel like everyone here probably already knows that from women who submit. But just this idea that, if you're putting a CV, if you're doing a writing sample, which are all elements that might come up, this is not the time to be shy. Definitely make sure that you are covering all of your achievements, all of your work, and all of your experience when you are putting the application together. So one thing that Emmy mentioned to me was visual artists would submit samples, right? And they actually, in the process, would put them on a projector like this one, some of the images. And some of them just didn't quite read well in the process, or they didn't read too boldly. And so she remembers the panel saying, like, this is not the time for subtlety, right? They wanted work that was really bold and that would really get your attention. And while this is more so visual art, I think it also applies to writing because she says, for writing, I would totally agree with that. This is not really the time to be subtle. You want to turn in work that is strong, that you're really excited about. And I think really that you feel enthusiastic about sharing with the panel. So keeping that in mind as well as you're getting your application ready. Another thing I like to advocate for is just thinking about time management, right? I feel like writers love to procrastinate. We love a deadline and then doing it the minute before it's due, 11:58 p.m. I totally get that, but I also feel like you want to feel good about what you're turning in when the deadline comes. So I really advocate for breaking down the application into all the elements. So make sure that you're reading the entire application through, and then and then you can set smaller deadlines. So when you set smaller deadlines, you can feel more confident about the time that it's going to take to complete each component. So for example, maybe, I give myself a reminder of finish the personal statement by June 1st. Let's say the application is due July 30th. Finish the statement by June 1st. The next week, maybe I want to have the CV in its first draft. The week after, maybe I need to check in with, do I need letters of recommendation? All of these sort of goalposts, so that by the time you get to July 31st, you're like, I'm set. I've already set myself up for success. I've already started on all of these elements, and it doesn't feel like now I have to do numbers 1 through 20. I've already sort of started that process. I think too, you have a lot of people here in the room who could be your accountability buddy, right? So I can ask Carla, can you please text me on June 15 and ask me if I've even worked on my personal statement? Or I can say like, Sochi, can you please just text me and, remind me that the application is due in 2 weeks. Have I done anything? I think that push can really help. And it can be vice versa, right? Even better if that person also has a deadline coming up. So I can say, yes, Carla, I've worked on it. Have you worked on your CV for the next application? I think that sort of sense of community and reciprocity and accountability can really make a big difference as well. How are we feeling? Do we have any questions so far? Staying hydrated? Okay. Again, I already mentioned this, but just the idea of reading the whole application first, setting some calendar reminders, and then having these smaller goalposts before that final deadline. So some common elements of a residency application might include a statement of intent. So this is actually directly from the Kimmel Harding Nelson for the Arts application. The application asks for a very brief statement, 250 words, about how you intend to utilize your time and why a residency was important to you at this point in your career. So here they're making it very clear that they want to know how you're going to use your time, how you're going to use that space, what it is that you're working on, and why is it at this point that you are applying versus not earlier or not in the future. And then they also, so for that sort of section, I think there's also space to talk about the reasons why you want to do the residency at this moment and sort of just reflecting on your project, right? Think about all the work that you've done leading up to this application and show them that you're already really excited and enthusiastic about the project, that you've already put the work in, but that having the residency will sort of help you go to that next step and that next level with the manuscript or the project that you are working on. This was actually my statement of intent for my application. So I really tried to highlight that this was a project that was in its very early stages. And so I was interested in continuing to sort of work on this manuscript. So I wasn't saying it's completed. I wasn't saying it's close to being completed. And that I also wanted to do some reading. So again, research. So because I'm telling them this is in the early stages, I'm still very much in the process. Well, one of the elements of that process was I want to do some reading. I want to have time to do research. I want to have time to really shift my focus kind of from my day-to-day routine to, okay, 2 weeks, I'm going to do the research and I'm going to do the writing. So that was sort of how I tried to incorporate a little bit about why is it at this point in my career and how will the residency help? So again, we're thinking about they want to know that they're going to maximize their impact, right? Well, I can say, because of this residency, I was able to finally do some really vital research that helped me, go in this direction with the manuscript. Or maybe I was able to rethink this manuscript that was very much in its early stages, that sort of thing. Some other things that they might be asking for in the application include writing samples, of course. You may be asked for references or letters of recommendation. It really just depends on the application and the organization. And then you might be asked for your CV or resume. In this instance, they actually asked for professional history, which was just listing everything that you wanted to list that would normally be on a CV. So you'll probably get some sort of mix of all of these questions and components that you need for each application. So let's say that you've done all the work, you've put in all the time, and then you have submitted your application. What's next? Again, I feel like you have to congratulate yourself on all the work that you've done because it is work. And I think one thing that I feel like I have learned from women who submit and a lot of other writer colleagues is that no matter the outcome, no matter whether you get a yes or no or a wait list, there are a lot of other takeaways that come with working on these applications. So the time that you've dedicated to the application, to getting the materials and to thinking through this is that you've really worked on refining your talking points about your project, right? So 250 words, 500 words, you've had to really distill, okay, what is this project about actually? And what is most important for me to communicate when I'm talking to others about my manuscript that's in progress or about a manuscript idea that I might have? And hopefully that just gets you excited to be talking about your project again, right? I think sometimes we go in the day to day and maybe we're working on really granular edits or we're sort of hoping that we would be further than we actually are. But hopefully this just helps you feel excited about the content of the project, the content of your manuscript that you're working on. And I think too, you start to get to know what you want from a residency. So while you're answering their questions, I think you're sort of getting some insights about yourself too, about why you want to do the residency, again, at this point in your career, or maybe at this point in the manuscript that you're working on. And you can just get more comfortable with some of the components that are in a standard application so that the next time around, you're like, I already know that they're going to ask for these things. I've got them ready. Carla already texted me to remind me. It gets more comfortable, I think, the more that you do it as well. Yeah. Some ideas, again, Women Who Submit is really good about this. Once you're done, get yourself a little treat, you know? Maybe text a friend or your buddy and say, we did it, I turned it in. Please send all the good vibes. Watch a movie, take a walk, just generally live life, right? Because those are the things that end up feeding into our creative practice anyway. So I think it's all really just a loop and a good cycle to sort of feed and nurture and kind of go from there. I think me personally, I've had to get used to not refreshing my inbox all the time when I send out applications. It is very difficult. However, I've learned over the years, the email always comes in when I'm not paying attention to my inbox. So just a reminder to kind of go out and live your life, do your thing. The email will probably come when you're not expecting it, not when you're sitting there and refreshing a billion times.
How many times have I submitted?
Submittable. I don't want to talk to her after I've submitted too many things. And just some ideas. I feel like you're all pros at this, but sort of where to find residencies with deadlines and opportunities that are coming up. Women Who Submit, of course, and everybody in this room has a lot of knowledge and resources that are available to you. Checking local arts organization websites. Again, thinking of sort of space and place and environments that you thrive in. One thing that in the last few years I've been paying attention to is sort of national parks and the residencies that they do. So if that's something that you're interested in, kind of like think through and brainstorm some of those interests of yours and some places that you feel like you would be productive and see if they already have programs that are in place. Of course, magazines, there's a lot of magazines on the table right now for you all, websites, just word of mouth, right? Just asking friends like what residencies they enjoyed, what they've applied to, what their experience has been. That can be super, super helpful. And again, I mentioned the acknowledgement sections at the end of books. A lot of them will give out shout outs to residencies that they really loved. And you know for a fact that if they put them in the end of the book, then they actually enjoyed the residency, one would think. And then a shameless plug for my newsletter, which goes out every month. And I try to include deadlines that are coming up in the next 1 to 3 months, and it goes out once a month. So that is on Substack, which I will talk about a little bit. But just sort of having these at your disposal, I think is really great. I think social media has made it really easy. Just a note though, to not sort of get overwhelmed by the amount of things that are out there. Again, I encourage you to think about sort of what are you excited about, enthusiastic about? What is it that you need? Don't feel like you need to apply to all the things that have deadlines coming up or all the things that you hear other people are applying for. Like really think about tailoring it to your needs and to your sort of career and goals at the moment. Any questions? Yes.
I have a question. Sometimes I get caught up with some of the like statement of artist statement or statement of intent, and then your bio, and so a lot of them feel like it's a repetition of the same.
Yeah.
It's the same question 10 times, so I get frustrated about how to word those things in a way. Sorry, I'll repeat for people that are on Zoom. But again, I was just asking about how do you differentiate when you're writing the different statements, because sometimes they feel like the same question.
Yeah.
4 times, and it could feel frustrating. Or I just feel like I'm saying the same thing, and I'm not figuring out how to say it in a different way.
Yeah, I think maybe paying attention to specifically what they want from sort of your statement, right? So there might be an artist statement that's just a general, like, tell us what, you know, your medium is and what you are interested in and what you've done and where you're based. It's like that could probably be the same for most applications. But I would say, for example, the sort of snippet I gave you here, that asked why this residency and why this point in your career. So then you might want to get a little bit more specific, a little bit more indicating that you've researched the residency. One thing that I mentioned in another part of my application was that I knew a few writers that had done the residency before and really enjoyed it. So I think that helps to differentiate. But yeah, I would say some parts are repetitive, but I would maybe take it as, okay, so you don't have to spend time on that. Let's redirect and spend a lot more time on the questions where you can be more specific. Yes.
This is not a question of comment. I just appreciate, I've never thought of, so I applied to a lot of residencies, but something you're saying I've never thought of, which is that residencies are a lot like what Wendy Smith says about journals. Like when you apply to a journal, when you submit to a journal, say something about them, because they want to know that you're invested in them and that you're paying attention. Like it's just not random.
Yeah.
And so like, and that makes a lot of sense, right? Like residencies are investing a lot of money and resources into you, so they want to know that you are equally invested. And then also like journals to look at the acknowledgements. Like, oh yeah, look at the acknowledgements.
Yeah.
Residencies too.
Yeah. And I will say when I was at Kimmel Harding Nelson Center, it was really nice because they actually had a couple shelves with books from authors who had done the residencies before. So that was really sweet to see. And they had some artworks that were hung all over the house from past residents too. So just kind of like that community, I think, building too.
I have a question online, which is the same as my question, which is from Cynthia. Do you have advice about applying for financial aid? And any advice answering the question, what would receiving financial aid mean to you?
It's a great question. I mean, I honestly, depending on your comfort level, I opt for transparency. So there have been times when I have applied for financial aid or for grants when I've said, like, this year I've been doing a lot less freelance work, and I feel like it would be sort of a cause of stress if I had to sort of come up with money for this opportunity. Maybe not in that exact wording, but you know, saying like, this year has been slower with work, or this year has been more challenging and I don't feel comfortable. I really want to do this opportunity, but I really, realistically, I can't cover the full cost. So that's sort of why I'm applying. And then you might see different asks. Some places might ask you specifically what your income is, and some places might not. They just want to hear why it would be helpful for you. And I think just as upfront and transparent as you can be is the most helpful.
I just want to give a shout out to everyone who submit and just remind people that 4 times a year you can apply for the Shockey Jackson No Barriers Grant, and that's $100, or you can apply for up to $100 to help with submission fees. We gave 2 out for this event, and one person just asked for $45 for the submission fee for residency. So there's that available. There's also the Kid Read Travel Fund. We gave 3 of those out a year, $400 to travel. It'll open again in July. We have 1 more left this year, so yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's been holding me back is I do write better in a different space and different, but I have been doing most of my writing and publishing over the last years has been more short form, more poetry. But what I really want to focus on is either a short story collection that I started years ago and how to publish writing from that, or a joint project with another writer who's more of a screenplay now on television.
Oh, cool.
Treatment.
Yeah.
Focusing on a couple where one partner has transitioned and they want to focus on the partner of the person. It's not about me. but I don't, but in terms of like submitting work to show like in that genre, that's what troubles me, because they're both really safe, but that's what's really calling me, as opposed to all I'm putting together in a poetry collection.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's super interesting though, right? Like if you frame it as the reason I want to do this residency at this point is because I have a short story collection that I haven't come back to in years, and I want that to be my specific focus. I feel like that's compelling in and of itself. Just being sort of upfront about it, showing that you're really enthusiastic, but you just haven't had the chance to get to that work. And I mean, knowing you is probably a really strong writing sample anyway. I would understand that like poetry is usually what you submit, probably you were saying, or lately, but your other work is also strong. So I think I would say just go for it and tell them that and tell them, you know, I'm really interested in this. I haven't done it. I feel like I remember doing that for there was one application where they did encourage folks to do that. And I applied for something for fiction. I said, it's not my usual genre, but I actually really want to have the space and sort of mentorship and community to explore a little bit more of that genre. And I feel like they're definitely open to that.
And did you submit a sample that was in fiction, or did you submit it in nonfiction?
I submitted a sample that was nonfiction,
Okay.
but if I remember, this was for a workshop, not a residency. But I feel like you have a lot that you could turn in. And then for collaborative, yeah, I think that's great. There's a lot of residencies where they ask you, is there a collaborator? Do you want to apply as a duo? Not all of them are set up that way, but there are some where you can definitely apply as a collaborative group.
So it is possible that you could submit work from another genre and say,
I think so, yeah. And I think maybe the smart thing to do would be to ask if you know anyone else who has applied to that residency, see if they had, yeah, kind of a different genre.
Can I do another? I just want to also say the Barbara Deming Fund is a fund that gives $2,000 for creative writers. I've gotten one. There might be a couple other people.
I have also gotten one.
Yeah, they're not that hard to get. $2,000. That would help to do some travel. What's it called? Barbara Deming Fund. DEMMING.
Yeah,
Women
and
writers. Oh, it's one M? One second.
yeah, and I actually used that grant to do just a staycation, but like a stay residency, I guess you would call it. And I told them that I wanted to get an Airbnb for a few nights to be able to work on manuscript edits. So that's what I used it for.
So in regard to residencies that are connected to culture or heritage, you know, there's a question of like, why, you know, what's the significance of this? And I kind of get caught in like paralysis. Like, I'm like, well, you know, it's connecting, you know, well, I can't even articulate it here. So like, what would you suggest? I mean, it might be too broad of a question when dealing with that to like set yourself apart, right? Because a lot of people are going to have the same, I would imagine a lot of people are going to have the same cultural connections and like use those points.
Yeah.
Like if you're going back to like the land that your family
Yeah.
from or something like that.
Yeah, that's a great question. I would think maybe be as specific with your own story as you can. So maybe the sort of motivation or the narrative that a lot of folks might have, like you mentioned, is I want to reconnect with this specific place because it is in my sort of family history, personal history. But maybe you can mention you specifically. Have you been there in the past? What was that like? When was that? Is it something that you spend a lot of time researching, thinking about in your work? I think just the more specific that you can get about your story and also just think about what is motivating you to apply, I think the better. I think they just want to see that you've sort of thought through it and that you have a very specific motivation. Again, that it's not just a random choice that you're applying.
Can I add something to that?
Yeah.
I think also what I try to advise people is to think about the research you're doing and to include that.
Yeah.
Like, you're already thinking about it, you've already visited the place, you've already researched, you found this weird folk story that's like not La Llorona and not, you know, or it's not Frida Kahlo, it's like a person who inspired Frida Kahlo. Like, you're already doing that work and like find those ways to include those names and that information because that shows, oh, this person's already actively doing this work. They're already like in it.
Yeah, yeah, I agree, 100%.
So this is a question for you, but also maybe for some people in the room who've done residencies. Someone who has like a 9 to 5 and the idea of taking even 2 weeks off. is like very daunting, not just financially, but also in terms of like everything else that goes on.
Yeah.
I'm wondering how people have dealt with that, what support you have gone out and gotten, also just the psychologicalness of it all.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I think leading into, I would say when you're already there, it helped. For me, I really liked sharing the space with my roommate, and we still keep in touch. And I think it helped that we were both like, what are you working on today? What's going on? And then some days it was like, I'm not being very productive. Let's go for a walk, etc. But I think having other people around you who are also there and focused on the residency and focused on doing their project is helpful, because I feel like then you're kind of in this little world that's separate from everyone else who's back at the office working on things, but you're not there, so you don't need to think about it. I think realistically though, yeah, there may be some points where you kind of just have to give yourself a little bit of grace. If something comes up for work and you have to shift your focus, hopefully it doesn't happen, but I know from personal experience that sometimes it does. Yeah, does anybody else have insights into that?
And we got a online really speak into like
I know that happened to me in a residency, and I was just like, well, this job that I have to do right now for the next hour or two allows me to be here for the rest of the time. So.
Yeah, yeah.
I'll tell you, I recommend not waiting, like, because I just couldn't do it when I was like single mom, raising, working. I at one point I had a residency that would take me, and they said, "Well, come for a month." Okay, come for 2 weeks, then come for a week, and I just couldn't. And that's stuff going on with my son. But if you can go, like, don't wait. Like there's a way. Now I see more. Like my fantasy was always that they would have childcare somewhere for sure. But I see more opportunities for like
Yeah.
parents, for instance. But you can carve it out for your life.
So a lot of us with women who met have gone to Dorland Arts Residency, at Dorland Mountain Arts Colony, right? And you can do a 2 or 3 day residency. You don't have to commit to 2 weeks to a month. You can, they'll let you. But I've gone like 4 times, and there have been people who just come for a few days, work on their work, and go. And so they have the schedule on their website, and you can look for that time. Take a 3-day weekend.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Yeah, once you're in at Dorland, the price is like way cheaper than getting an Airbnb. So you pay for it, but it's cheaper. And then once you're in, you can do that. And I think choose when you go. Did somebody else have?
I was just gonna add, and you guys haven't addressed this, how do residencies fit into life with children as a primary caregiver for young children? And is that just something maybe you will want for later, or I just started to talk about shorter residencies, things like that, but I wonder if anyone else has experience to add.
I know that we have 2 members, Hazel Heideram and Mika Mikata. They're both mothers of younger children, and they're also grade school and high school teachers. And they'll do short trips. Like they'll take time off and they'll go for a week or 2 weeks to like Dorland, or there's also this other one in the Redwoods. I don't know its name, but up north in the Redwoods, there are smaller residencies that can go for short amounts. Right?
Oh, Pen Parentis, I think it's called. Yeah.
There's a new question over here.
So I don't know if this question is, but why do you haven't actively been working on something that you want to go back to your writing that has been there for a while? Is that?
I think that's great. Yeah. I think again, just being specific about that in your application and telling them that up front, I think that's really good. And then talking about sort of maybe why you're excited about the project, again, why you're excited about that specific residency. But yeah, I definitely say go for it. I don't think they're all looking for sort of new things or recent in progress things. You can definitely sort of bring in whatever project it is that the residency would benefit,
I think that would be a good application.
Yeah.
I haven't been able to get back to this work for these reasons, and I'm excited to come here and finally, I think that could be a great application.
Yeah, and have it be the focus. Yeah.
Maybe just hold it and speak into it.
Okay.
This is so the online people can hear you.
Perfect. Thank you. Hi, online people. I was just gonna say that, like, something that's a barrier often for me is the application fees. And that I have had more success than I had anticipated in asking for fee waivers. And a lot of times, I mean, I get it, because people need to make money, to keep
Yeah.
organizations going. But if it, sometimes it's really hard if you want to apply to certain ones, it really adds up. Sometimes it's hidden, sometimes, sometimes it's more like first 25 people.
Yeah,
get
yeah.
this. On a couple, I just wrote and said, like, hey, look, this is my situation. And I just want to encourage, if it's an economic barrier, that really helps.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I love that. I think always definitely look for it. But to your point, if you just want to reach out and ask, I think that's great. That's such a good idea. And apply for women who submit opportunities, other opportunities that are out there.
Yeah, 4 times a year, we're giving out $200.
I used my grant to go to Kenyan was that last year? Year before? What is time? I don't know. Anything else? No? Alrighty, thank you everybody. Appreciate it. I hope that was helpful.
Thank you, Eva.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.